What about, you kind of mentioned some of those viruses, nidovirus and IBD and all these things.
IBD.
And so how much of an issue do you think this is? Because this is an area that I think we as the hobby are not doing a great job on as far as biosecurity is concerned. And you know,
Yeah.
you think even things like reptile expos could be a little bit of a question mark at this point when we start, especially now with the whole coronavirus thing, we start thinking about these things differently. And especially in the States, things get traded and swapped and flown across the country so quickly and easily. Their weather really, they can ship all the time and they have these massive expos. So as far as you're concerned, how much of an issue or reason to worry are these sort of viruses?
They are a problem, and again, trying to think of the best solution is difficult. I mean, what I will say is a lot of these viruses in reptiles are spread by direct contact with bodily fluids. So, if you go to an expo, I can guarantee if you go to a reptile show, there will be arenavirus and there will be nidovirus in that room. I guarantee it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if the animals are in closed containers and if you're regularly disinfecting your hands and you disinfect your hands between handling every animal, I still think the transmission of those diseases, the transmission risk actually is still probably quite low. That's not the situation for birds, by the way, because most bird viruses are airborne. And so bird shows are a complete nightmare because you've got birds flapping and wire cages and dust floating about everywhere. I mean, biosecurity is much more difficult. But I think with reptile shows, actually, as long as you're sensible and you disinfect your hands, I think the transmission risk is still quite low. And that's from the point of view of transmission between tables and between animals. But the question is then, well, what if you're buying animals? And yes, there is a risk that you're going to bring in, those viruses, and I think it's a case of, testing and quarantine. And if you're not sure what protocol should be in place or what you should be doing, speak to an exotic vet, basically. He'll be able to advise you.
Yeah. Proper biosecurity, bringing animals in is really crucial, and testing and long quarantines, which people don't often have patience for, but that is really what you need to make sure you don't spread that.
And some of these viruses, can be dormant for months, sometimes even years, and so even if you're quarantining sometimes for 4 weeks or 6 weeks, it's not foolproof. It's not, things can still slip through the cracks. I think for some of those things, I think for both of those diseases that you mentioned, nidovirus and arenavirus, I think keepers should be testing their animals in quarantine, ideally.
Yeah.
Particularly if they've got a lot of animals. It's just crazy to be, if you've got boas, some keepers may have it in their collection already, and they may not be that worried. They may say, well, I know I've got it, and I'll cut my losses. And it's important to remember as well that with both of those viruses, nidovirus and arenavirus, not all animals will go on to develop disease. And if people are open and honest and they say, look, I have arenavirus in my collection, but none of my animals are currently sick. And people want to trade amongst that, but there's that transparency, then I think fair enough. I think it's a difficult one. Should we euthanize all boa constrictors that are positive for arenavirus? Well, that's thousands and thousands and thousands of snakes that are out there, But I think keepers should make a reasonable attempt to keep them out of their collections. And I think if you've got a few boas, test them all. And if you find they are negative, test them again in a few months. And if they're still all negative, then you want to be careful about what you're bringing in.
Yeah.
And if you've got a negative collection and you're buying in new snakes, it would be stupid not to test them at least twice before you put them into your collection.
Yeah, I think that's so right, and I'm hoping that becomes more of a common practice, because especially with collections growing larger and larger these days, and it doesn't make sense if we can slow the virus spread down a lot, like you're saying, if just keeping those animals isolated and not trading so much.
Maybe we'll get to a point where people will sell, boas and pythons, for example, with testing certificates.
Yeah.
Certainly in aviculture, with parrots, for example, it's very common to buy a parrot that's been tested for citizen beacon feather disease and Bornavirus and chlamydia and all these diseases that parrots commonly get. I mean, maybe we'll get to that point with reptiles. The difficulty then is you need to trust whoever's done it to have taken the swab from the right place.
Right.
And not just swabbed their shoe or something, or sent a blank swab.
Yeah. That's interesting. So in the parrot, in the bird world, do people trust the certificate? Or is there still kind of a mistrust?
Well, I think, and often in the parrot world, the disease testing will be done by a vet, and I think that gives it a bit more credibility as well. It's tricky because obviously that everything costs, and if you want to do things properly in reptile keeping, if you want to keep your animals with a high level of husbandry, and if you want to provide them with good medical care and disease prevention, probably the value of animals needs to increase. A lot of these animals are just far too cheap to justify a lot of these things, I think. I mean, I think we've massively devalued